from the worldwide leader in sports. So much going on in the association, so we decided to call him up. How you doing, Brian?
Hey, Rich.
How does the trade deadline being moved affect things, do you think?
Good question. It's so fresh. Nobody really knows. I mean, it's a pretty big move. It's a 2-week move, and it means it's going to hit more at mid-season than it would have before, where it's a little bit later in the year. My initial reaction would be that typically we see certain teams hit the eject button at some point in mid-season, decide they're sellers. Baseball teams are going through that right now, for example. And I would guess that if it happens earlier in the year, you may have fewer sellers. That there are more games left. There are more teams that are convinced that they can still make the playoffs. So, as a initial reaction, my guess is it might stifle a little bit of action. But one of the things that we've seen over the last couple of years is there's sort of two waves of trades. One wave of trades starts happening in December for various reasons, primarily because of free agents can be traded starting December 15th. And then there's another second wave of trades that happen then around the deadline in February. My guess is that would collapse the trade season and make it a little bit more stuff together. So in that way, it may create more of a trade season, even if there may be less deals total.
Brian Windhorst in the Honda Insider Report. I did not hear anything essentially codified to try and eliminate star players being rested on the road, certainly in cities that only get one shot at a star player coming into their building. What was discussed, based on your knowledge, in the Board of Governors about all that, Brian?
No, there was. So the season opening will be October 17th, which is about 12 days earlier than it was last year. And so those extra 12 days will be built into the schedule to allow more rest, fewer back-to-backs. So in theory, there's going to be less of a reason to rest players because there's going to be, 10 or so extra days built into the season. Now, the thing about it is, Rich, this has got to be a collaborative effort. This can't just be the league altering the schedule a little bit. There's also got to be a recognition from the players and teams that there's a business aspect to this. And, I am certainly a believer in player health and the development of sports science, but I'm also a pragmatist, and you have to realize that you have to take care of your customers. When you begin disrespecting your customers, you put yourself in position to have business troubles. And so what I really think the best rule of advice would be to the NBA teams is don't disrespect your customers. When you consider about resting a player, consider the business factors that are in there. Don't let the business factors lead, but consider them. And I think that's a mandate that comes from ownership, and I think that's where Adam Silver is trying to make this plea. Now, whether or not there's going to be cooperation on this or not, I think that's what we're going to determine in this next season.
So it's basically like we can't tell you what to do, but what we're going to do is build in an extra week and a half into the season, and those 10 days should supplant the 10 days that the Cavs, say, rested LeBron James. And even though they did that, we still heard about how LeBron was somewhat out of gas in a playoffs, that he played a remarkable small amount of games before getting to the finals where he had to carry too much of a load. You see where I'm going with this whole thing, Brian?
Yeah, and the other thing is with sports science, Rich, it's not like you can look at the schedule in October and say, hey, our player is going to be tired this day in February. That's the whole point. They track these players, and the idea is when they get when the signals go off with the analytics that they analyze that indicate the player's running down, that's when they give them a day off. And whether that happens on a home game against a nobody opponent or it happens on a road game in a national television game, sometimes you can't control it. So obviously this is still going to be an issue. However, what the league is saying is meet us halfway here. You complained about having back-to-back, so when you took off these Saturday night games, okay, we're going to make sure that you don't play on a Saturday night or Sunday afternoon where you have to play the day before. So meet us in between, and if you have a choice between taking that Saturday night game off or taking the following Monday game off at home against the worst team in the league. How about you take Monday off instead? That's what they're asking them to do, to come to the middle. I can't predict how it's going to happen, but the league is taking action here. And so we'll see whether the players and coaches come to the middle in that regard as well.
ESPN's Brian Windhorst joining me here on the Honda Insider Report. What's the latest between the Rockets and the Knicks for Carmelo? What's going on here?
Yeah, this is a challenge, and as of yesterday, I really don't think they had traction on this. I know that there were reports out there that wasn't true, that they did. From what I'm being told, there's no traction. There's a desire. The Rockets want to trade for Carmelo, and that's interesting to me because Carmelo and Mike D'Antoni were not friends when he was head coach of the Knicks. And Melo wants to go to Houston, which is relevant here because he has a no-trade clause. And not only is it granting permission, but he's got an $8 million bonus that he gets if he's traded, Rich. And that makes it very hard to trade him. He has the opportunity to waive that, all or part of it. Chris Paul did this in his trade to Houston. He waived almost all of it so the trade would go through. So Melo having interest in going to Houston is important, but there's not a natural trade there. There's certain players the Rockets don't want to give up, and certain players that the Knicks don't want to swallow. And I think we could be in for a stalemate. I do think historically when we see two teams that are very motivated to make a trade, typically we see that trade eventually happen. But neither side has any motive to cave in the discussions right now. We're in July. So I would just keep an eye on it, but I don't think it's a boiling situation right now.
Paul George introduced in Oklahoma City yesterday, Brian Windhorst. What needs to happen for him to stay and sign long-term? Do they have a shot here?
Well, he kind of gave a little bit of a roadmap where he referenced, if we could get to the conference finals or finals. Obviously, if you got to the finals, it means you somehow got through or around the Warriors.
Yeah.
But he wasn't binding. And, I think if you look at the way he approached his last season in Indiana, I don't see why he would be any different. And that is, he makes very positive comments about the team he's on, but absolutely nothing that you could use against him later. He will leave every sentence he states on the record about it will leave an out because that is the playbook, and I don't expect that to change. And to me, what's very interesting here is that Russell Westbrook hasn't signed that contract extension, and frankly, Rich, he doesn't have a lot of motive to do so. He's in a different situation than Steph Curry and James Harden were in. He doesn't have a monetary advantage for signing the extension because he's a little bit more experience level than those other guys. The Thunder can't give him any more money than he could get anyway if he waited a year. Plus, he has an option built into his contract for $30 million next year. So he's got an insurance policy. Even if he gets hurt or something, he's protected. So if I were his agent, I would probably advise him not to sign that contract just to see how things go. And that means that it's going to be an incredible all-in season for the Thunder, as all-in as any team I've seen in recent memory, because they have a team that has a chance to seriously compete, but they also have a team that they have no control over probably after this season, and neither Paul nor Russ Westbrook is holding the pen ready to sign right now.
And, of course, we all know Paul George has made it known that he'd like to go to the Los Angeles Lakers, who have Lonzo Ball front and center in Las Vegas right now, Brandon Ingram. Also, supposedly one of the other young players that could attract Paul George even more. And then last night, sitting watching the game, was LeBron James wearing purple. And everybody around here, I mean, how much there
was he wearing
there?
Purple? I thought it was just a regular tie-dye T-shirt.
No, I mean, there was a lot of it was purplish. Okay. I think it was predominantly purple.
It was purplish.
Yeah. So how much there is there in the conversation that he is there in Las Vegas to kick the tires on either the Lakers or the Sixers, who he's sitting in front of last night?
Rich, here's the thing. Whether LeBron had come to that game or not, he's still going to be a free agent next year, and it's still going to be incumbent on the Cavs to be attractive for him to stay. And part of it is going to be the East-West imbalance that may play into the Cavs' favor. But LeBron doesn't have to. LeBron has a wonderful situation that if you're at the top of your field, no matter what field you're in, if you're one of the top neurosurgeons in the country, you can probably go to any hospital you want. If you declare yourself a free agent, every hospital in the country is ready to take you. That's the situation LeBron is in. He, unlike teams who have to prepare for years in advance for free agency, LeBron can keep his options open because he's so damn good. So he's in a position where it doesn't matter what game he goes to in July. He knows the options are going to be there the following July. That's just the way it's going to be. And that's not going to change in December. It's not going to change in April. It's not going to change in June. It really just matters where he is in July. And I know as part of my job, I'm going to get asked about this for the next 11 months.
Oh, yeah.
And my answer is going to be the same every time. It doesn't matter what LeBron feels like on that day. All that matters is what he feels like on July 1st.
But what was he doing?
So,
is he taking in the Backstreet Boys show too? I mean, what's he doing in Las Vegas to do this on SB night?
If he wore a full Lakers get-up yesterday, my opinion on this would not change. He has the full. Rich,
yeah.
I'm sorry if I've used this before. What are you having for dinner on June 30th, 2018?
I have no earthly idea, Brian.
But you know that as somebody who has a job and just somebody who lives in a civilized society, that if you want salmon, you can have it. If you want steak, you can have it. If you want chicken, you can have it. You know. Why would you worry about it? You're not worried about it today.
But if I had nothing better to do, I would go to 2 restaurants that serve steak and salmon to just check it out, to know whether, when that day comes, what restaurant to go to.
Because you can order the finest steak in the country because you have the means to do so.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm saying. It's not going to matter. Seriously, I'm going to be very clear. If the Cavs went 82-0 this last regular season, and they went 16-0 in the playoffs, and in the finals, LeBron went 150 and 150 from the field, and French kissed Dan Gilbert as they won the second title, my answer would exactly be the same today. And that is that LeBron will get to free agency next year, look at the lay of the land, and decide on his best option. He doesn't have anything decided because he has the luxury of not having to decide.
Now that's what I call.
That's just the reality that he lives in.
That's what I call an insider report right there. Last one for you before I let you go. Did Durant know about Peyton Manning's joke?
Great question. I always assume conspiracy, but I don't have the insider SB information to. I always assume that. That things are worked out. I mean, certainly that Cody, what's the catcher's name from the Cubs? I'm not a baseball guy. David
Ross. David Ross. Yeah.
He's my coworker. I'm sorry. Certainly that was scripted out. So my guess is there was a lot of scripting that went into that show.
Brian, thanks for the call. We'll chat soon.
Okay.
You got it. That's Brian Windhorst in the Honda Insider Report.
The Rich Eisen Show. Weekdays at noon Eastern on radio stations across the country and audience.
If you liked some of that, get some more of that on the Rich Eisen Show app. Follow all the information you see right here on the Rich Eisen Show.